I am still in the process of moving. And so if my lighting and my sound is all messed up, I apologize. But in the meantime, I really want to talk about the importance of building a creative bubble. For anyone who's new to the channel, my name is Seth. I'm a full-time fantasy author, and we are very close to hitting 1,000 subs. We're trying to get partnered on this channel, so if you like the kind of content I create, please, please, please do me a favor and subscribe. Today we're going to be talking about a creative bubble. So what is a creative bubble? Well, a creative bubble is the optimal state for your creativity. Everybody's creative bubble is different. And learning how to build your own bubble is one of the most important skills you can develop as a full-time creative. In fact, if you look at any full-time creative, you start to realize that they have their own bubble. And there are a lot of similarities that these bubbles share, but every bubble is different. Now, even if you're not trying to be full-time creative and you just want to create cool stuff, making a bubble can help. It can take a lot of the guesswork out of your creative time, and it can shorten the amount of time it takes to get into a creative state. Really, a bubble is just a way of organizing a whole bunch of habits that will help your creativity thrive. Without even realizing it, I've been building my own creative bubbles for the last 3 or 4 years. And it was only when I really started to focus on developing them that my author career took off. Now, before you freak out, I was able to do that while working a full-time job. So it's not as if you need to be a full-time creative already in order to make a good bubble. But let's back up. What is a creative bubble? A creative bubble is a physical space, a state of mind, and a set of rules that allow you to be optimally creative. Like I said, anyone can make one, and every successful creator has one. In fact, as you look back throughout history, you realize that a lot of the geniuses that we look up to were really just people with highly optimized creative bubbles. Sure, there was genius in what they did, but the real genius is something that we can replicate. It's in these bubbles. When we look at famous authors' lives, for example, take George Bernard Shaw. He created his own bubble. It was a shed outside of his house that he called London, so he could tell people, I'm going to London, and then not have to talk to them for hours and hours and hours as he sat in his shed writing. That was his space. He also realized that he worked best in direct sunlight, and so he made his shed so that it could rotate so that he could be facing the optimal direction at all times. And history is full of these examples of people who have created their own space where they work best. I'm not going to bore you with the details of everybody's different bubbles, and instead, let's just talk about how you can create yours. Because the truth is, the earlier you start building your own creative bubble, the better off you're going to be. So, what does it take to make an awesome creative bubble? Well, the first component is space. And you need that space to be a few different things. You need it to be distraction-free, you need it to be isolated, and you need it to be consistent. Now let's walk through each of those different things. What do I mean by distraction-free? It needs to be a space in which you can focus. Different people have different requirements for focus. Some people need absolute silence and a clean blank room. Other people, when put in that situation, would find themselves immensely distracted, but they can concentrate just fine in, let's say, a crowded coffee shop with people walking by, with people talking. They find that they can concentrate really well in that space. Some people need ambient noise like music in the background. Some people need a TV or something that stimulates their eyes. Everybody's concentration is different, and optimizing for your concentration is what you need to do. But you do need it to be distraction-free. And what I mean by distraction-free is you need to actually be able to concentrate in that space. So don't make going to a coffee shop part of your creative bubble if you get distracted by all of the people walking around. If that's the case, maybe try sitting outside or again, sitting in that quiet room. You also need to be isolated. It doesn't matter whether you're around people or not, you just need a barrier so that you aren't talking to them. You need to be alone with your thoughts. That could be physical distance between you and other people. I like to write in a room where nobody else is. Or it could be something as simple as a pair of headphones. And then finally, you need it to be consistent. You need to be able to go to that same place every single time. And the reason is because when we enter the same place over and over again, it frees our mind from worrying about the space we're in because we know it, it's familiar. And that frees us to be creative. So whether you want to write in a shed or you want to write at the coffee shop, it doesn't matter as long as it works for you. As long as the space has those three components. It's distraction-free, it allows you to be isolated, alone with your thoughts, and it's a consistent place that you can go. The second component of a creative bubble is mindset. And once again, there are three major things we need in order to make our mindset work with our creative bubble. First, we need a commitment to entering. That means you have to be committed to entering that space, right? We've already established the space that we're going to use for our creative bubble, whether it's the shed or the coffee shop, and you have to be committed to entering that space. You also have to be committed to staying in that space and not just leaving when you get bored or when it becomes hard. And finally, you need a willingness to be bored, to accept that not all of the time you spend in your creative bubble is going to be magical and creative. In fact, a fair portion of it won't be, but that's okay. As you practice the discipline of creativity, you'll realize that boredom is actually your friend. Because your first idea, while it might be good, is not going to be as good as your 60th idea. But getting to your 60th idea requires the willingness to enter the bubble and stay in the bubble, enduring boredom while you come up with all of these ideas. Real creativity happens on the other side of boredom. But the only way you get there is with the proper mindset. That commitment to entering the room, the commitment to staying in the room until you get the idea, and the willingness to be bored as you come up with bad ideas so that you can eventually get to the good ones. And finally, the third thing you need in order to build your creative bubble is a set of rules. I like to think about things in threes, as you can probably tell, and I like to think of it in terms of limiting what I bring into the bubble, limiting what I'm allowed to do inside of the bubble, and limiting what I bring out of the bubble. Why are these rules important? They're important because they give me structure for how I work. Now, some people say, well, creativity is about not having structure. That's false. Totally false. Creativity is about playing with structure. It's about taking established structure and bending it in new directions. But in order to do that, you have to have something to work with. A painter can't paint if there's no canvas. A writer can't write if they don't have language. A director can't shoot a film without a camera. You have to have the medium in order to bend it, in order to create something new with it. There has to be something from which you can create. And establishing a set of rules for my creative bubble helps me do that. I limit what I can bring into the space. I'm not allowed to bring business into the space. I'm not allowed to bring my relationships into the space. I'm not allowed to bring my worries into the space. Instead, when I step into my creative bubble, I'm trying to do so with as much focus on the story that I want to tell as possible. And then I limit what I can do inside. While I'm inside of that space, when I'm inside my creative bubble, all I'm allowed to do is explore the world of the story that I'm trying to tell. Explore the characters, try to understand them, try to understand what they're going to do, try to solve the problems that they're getting into, try to create new problems for them to solve. All of my focus is on the story. And finally, I limit what I'm allowed to take out of the space. And this is more specific to me, but I've realized that I don't do very well if I think about a story constantly. I need breaks from it. And so I leave my work at work. And when I leave the bubble, my story doesn't come with me. I don't keep thinking about it. Now, often I'll have these flashes of insight later on when I'm not in my creative bubble. And that's okay. I take those ideas and I bring them into the bubble the next day. But I don't intentionally try to work through the problems with my story while I'm outside of the bubble. Everybody's rules for their creative bubble are going to look totally different, and that's fine. In fact, they should look different because we're all different people. But the goal is to figure out what kinds of rules really work well for you. Ultimately, we need a willingness to experiment because making a creative bubble isn't something that happens overnight. It's not something that we just come up with and it stays optimal forever. My creative bubble is changing all of the time because my life is changing. In fact, change is the only constant. I think I have a video about that, so you should go check it out. But as long as we can be flexible, as long as we can adapt to the changing situation around us, we can create these bubbles that will allow us to be optimally creative. But I'm curious to know how you would set up your creative bubble. Or do you already have one? Let me know in the comments what it is that you do in order to get yourself in the optimally creative mindset.